Now you are going to create the login frame. To do so, add a Flex container into FLX login content and name it FLX login main. Configure the look properties. Top 55%, width 90%, height 50%, and center X 50%. Go to the Skin tab, select the background type, and set it to single color. Set the color value to FF, 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 and set the opacity to 94%. Go to Border and set the value to 1 pixel. Set the type to single color. The color value is E0, 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 and the opacity is 100%. Set the style to custom and radius to 10 pixels. Go to the Flex Container Properties tab and configure the layout type property as flow vertical. When you make the layout flow vertical, the top property will be calculated from the previous widget in the container rather than from the parent widget. You need a text box to capture the input from the user. Add a TextBox 2 widget into FLX login main and name it TBX for TextBox username and configure the look properties. Top 10%, width 80%, height 12%, center X 50%, and remove the text value. Go to the Skin tab and make the text box transparent. Set the border property to 0. In our design, we will not have a border around the text box. That's why we set it to 0. Now go to the Fonts property. Set the color value to 1D, 1D, 26. Set the font size to 130% and the font name to Helvetica Light. Go to the Text Box Property tab, find the placeholder property in the list, and set the value to username. Go to Placeholder Skin and enable it. Now go to Font, set the color to BD, 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 the font name to Helvetica Light, and the font size to 130%. Now you need to add a line under the text box. Kony does not have any line widget, but you can use a Flex container to make a line. To do so, drag a Flex container inside the FLX login main, set the name to FLX divider line 1, and configure the look properties. Top 1%, width 80%, height 1 dp, and center X 50%. As you can see, we set the top value to 1% because the top gets calculated from the previous text box widget, not from FLX login main. This is a popular design technique. You use a flex container to create a line. Just be sure to set the right height property. If you want a broader line, you need to increase the height value. Now go to the Skin tab. Set the background type to single color and set the color value to dB, dB, dB and opacity to 100%. Now you need to configure the password box. You already know how to do that because it is almost identical to the steps we just went through. Add another text box widget to FLX login main and set the name to TBX or text box password and configure the look properties. Top 5%. Width 80%. Height 12%. And center X 50%. Remove the text value. Go to the Skin tab, make the text box transparent, and set the border property to 0. Now go to the Fonts property. The color value is 1D, 1D, 26. Set the font size to 130% and the font name to Helvetica Light. Turn on the Mask Text property because this turns the input from the user into these little dots on the screen, just in case someone is looking over their shoulder. Set the placeholder value to password. Go to the placeholder skin and enable it. Now go to Font, set the color to BD, 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 and the font name again to, you guessed it, Helvetica Light. The font size is 130%. Create a second line using the steps you already know. First, let's zoom in so that we can see exactly what we're doing. Here's where you do your magic. See, that looks pretty good. Now you need to add the Remember Me option. Add a Flex container into the FLX login main and set the name to FLX Remember Me. Configure the look properties. To get the Remember Me option look, you need a label widget and a switch widget. First, add the label widget. Drag a label widget onto FLX Remember Me and set the label to LBL or Label Remember Me. Configure the look properties. Left 0%, width 60%, and center Y 50%. The text should say, "Remember me." The height property preferred is a special property. It wraps the display text when it is wider than the screen, and the widget's height will grow based on the content. Now go to the fonts property. Set the color to value 1D, 1D26. Font size to 124%. The font name to Helvetica Light. And you're done with this part. To add a switch widget, drag the switch widget from the Advanced Widgets and place it inside the FLX Remember Me container. Set the name for the switch widget to Switch Remember Me. And configure the look properties. Good work! In the next lesson, we are going to add the Sign In button. See you in a little bit.